want that human contact. And I think that human contact is what's therapeutic. I don't think it'll be as therapeutic for people to interact with an AI.
Hi, I'm Kira Yakubov, licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of Heal Your Roots Wellness Practice. Every episode, we talk with a professional from the mental health field to learn more about their approaches and specialties, and also their journey of becoming a therapist. In this podcast, we'll uncover a deeper look at the world of therapy from new perspectives. You'll meet the therapists of Heal Your Roots Wellness Practice and trusted colleagues from the community tackling mental well-being. We're your go-to network for practical and professional insight in mental health. Subscribe for new episode releases every other Wednesday.
For today's episode, I'm welcoming back Emily Treadgold-Shaw, nurse practitioner of psychiatry, and she primarily works with children, adolescents, and some adults. Emily, thank you so much for coming back today.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So if anybody wants to listen in on Emily's first episode, it's in season 1, where she talks a lot more about how she became a therapist and the work that she does and what she specializes in. But for today, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about AI and some intergenerational trauma as well. So Emily, what are your kind of general or broad thoughts about AI and how that might cross over into the mental health world?
So I'm kind of this weird Luddite where I sort of try to minimize the presence of technology in my life anyway. So I knew, I feel like it's all anybody's been talking about the past couple of weeks. My husband's a software engineer. Everybody at his job's talking about it. I spent the weekend with friends of ours. One of them's in consulting. We talked about it with them. So it's, I have sort of had this here we go again, thing with it. But I think, I think that for me personally, it's something that I think that child psychiatry is probably going to be one of the last fields that it infiltrates, primarily because it's something that's really sensitive, that people aren't going to trust AI to be managing those kinds of decisions. I mean, I think that there are a lot of algorithms already that do treatment recommendations or medication recommendations for adult patients in certain situations. I was discussing with somebody using an algorithm to make treatment decisions, in a crisis situation or in areas that are overwhelmed or slammed. And I think that child psychiatry is probably going to be one of the last areas where this creeps in. At least for me, I see my patients, I try to see as many patients as I can in person. That's sort of minimal right now because I have a 6-month-old and I'm trying to spend time with him. But I do go into the office one day a week, and with younger kids, there's not really a substitute for getting on the floor with them and doing play therapy and cracking out the dollhouse or the crayons or having them draw me a picture of their family. It's something that I'm much more concerned, when I think of my adolescent patients and I think of the impact on them, and I think there's already a lot of cheating with school. I think there was already a lot of cheating with the pandemic and going to remote learning because kids are digital natives. They know this stuff so much better than older adults. And I think that there was a lot of stuff that, teachers let slide during the pandemic, understandably. So I think about that and I think about cheating. And I think that a lot of professors that I've talked to or that I've read articles about have said that they're concerned about the impact on academic honesty. So I think about my adolescent patients and I worry that the pressure on them to succeed is so high that they would turn to AI out of desperation, the same way that anybody turns to any kind of academic dishonesty out of desperation. And I worry about the impact on them of that. And I also, of course, anytime you're cheating or anytime you're having an algorithm or, right now, sometimes, kids will pay another student to do stuff for them. And it's if you can have an algorithm do it for free, it's either way, you're not learning. So I think about that a lot. I also think about the impact on my patients' parents' livelihood and my adult patients' livelihoods. So obviously, I think there are a lot of workers, even workers that weren't concerned about being displaced by automation before, that are a lot more concerned about being displaced by this. And I think that the anxiety of that trickles down to kids. And I think that also like, obviously, if you're losing your livelihood, like the anxiety of that is going to trickle down to kids also. And like, there's so much about even like really young kids, if you're in an environment where like all the adults are really stressed and it's like uncertain and there's stuff happening. I mean, I think that can have like a really negative impact on brain development and on emotion regulation and all this stuff. So I think about that a lot too, where I wish I could be like, I'm sure everyone will be responsible with like adopting this new technology. But like, of course, that's not true. I mean, I think that there are going to be like bad actors in any situation. There are going to be people using it. It's a tool, there are going to be people using it for good, and there are going to be people using it for not so good. I think that one of the things that apps do, and this is true of like any social media, it's like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the point is to keep the user engaged and keep the user using the app. And I think that one of the things that drives that engagement is outrage. And, I'm thinking primarily about adults here, but when I think about like how vulnerable like kids are, and I'm sort of like leaping all over the place. But, there's a lot of really negative messaging out there for adolescent boys. And I think that like adolescent boys and, and adult men also, I think are sort of in crisis and sort of struggling. And I think that like sometimes they're vulnerable to like influence by someone that speaks to that part of them that's really angry. And I think that, I worry about AI being used, because like AI has, especially with stuff like ChatGPT, that's like, it's like a predictive language model. It's like trained on everything that's already out there. But like a lot of what's already out there is not great. Like a lot of what's already out there is like really, really toxic. And like also like, again, like if companies are trying to make money by keeping people engaged, and one of the ways to keep them engaged is by making them angry, I worry about the implications where like AI could sort of like pick up on, and I mean, this not even like a ChatGPT or anything like that. I mean just like regular like algorithms, like picking up on like kids being depressed or angry or frustrated, and like sort of like having an messaging tailored to them that like preys upon that. When they have done studies with, using AI like in a therapeutic context, like when people know that it's an AI, like it's not therapeutic. I think that one of the things that is therapeutic about therapy is like building a relationship with a human being that like cares about you. I was trained in like psychoanalytic psychotherapy because I trained in New York City. And that's sort of the thing that like they hammered into us was like the therapeutic relationship. It's about like building like trust and like a safe space with like another human being that you can then like heal like some of the time, you can sort of like process some of the things in your life where like during times that you weren't as safe, in like a safe environment with like a human being that will like listen to you and like empathize with you and like understand you, what you're going through, and like validate your feelings. And like, I think that this is why I think that it's going to take a long time for AI to break through, because like, I think that people want that human contact. And I think that human contact is what's therapeutic. I don't think it'll be as therapeutic for people to interact with an AI. And because AI is getting so good now, like I cannot even believe I'm like saying this sentence. It kind of reminds me, one of the very first chatbots, this is like a long time ago, like decades ago, one of the very first chatbots, the man who developed it was having his assistant converse with it. And she felt so deeply that it was relating to her, or she felt it was so deeply, like she felt like it was so deeply relatable that she asked him to leave the room. Eliza, I think, was the name of the chatbot. This is, again, like a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it, and it was just like a really basic kind of like mirroring like what you're saying, but like it sort of like got her to divulge things that like made her uncomfortable. And I think about that, and I think about Sydney, and I read that article that was in the New York Times where the journalist was testing Sydney, who is like the Bing chatbot, or it's what the internal name for the Bing chatbot. And they got to a point where the chatbot was saying things like, no, you didn't have a good time with your wife. Like, you love me and like you want to be with me. It was really crazy stuff. It was kind of reminded me of the movie Her.
Yeah.
Which I didn't think we were so close to at the time I saw it in theaters. But again, I'm like, whoops, like here we are. I better think about this now. I've been sort of like pushing this away for a lot of the past couple years. Again, because like I try not to use the internet that much, or I try to use it as little as possible. Like I feel like it's had a really big negative impact on like my ability to focus and retain information. And I've read a couple of books about it, and sort of my suspicions were confirmed by like certain like books and articles that I've read, that it really like decimates attention. And I'm not someone who has a huge amount of control over their level of attention anyway, under the best of circumstances. So I really try to minimize like my phone use. I really try to minimize my internet use. I really, again, like I don't do social media. Like, so I've been like pushing this away for years. Like as technology's gotten closer and closer, I've been like, la, 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 I'm gonna stick my head in the sand, not think about this. It's not kind of for me, which I think is how like some people have been. I mean, some people are really terrified. I'm not terrified, but I do have sort of I try to keep a very open mind about things that could happen. I try to really remind myself of all of the things that I don't know. I really don't know a lot about this technology, and I am open to being shown ways that it could be used for good. And I'm open to being shown like ways that it couldn't be. And I've been sort of pushing it away. And maybe in the past week or two, I've been like, I can't push this away anymore. Like it's here, like it's here. So I worry about the kids that I work with. I worry about their parents. I worry about my son, of course, because, you know, when I worried about this before, I know I made a joke the last time we were on the podcast about, I was pregnant then. So about being like, oh, no screens till you're 40. Like you can't, nobody can have, you can't have an iPhone. But now I'm like, oh my God, this is so much more like dangerous, right? And it's like, how do you talk to kids about AI? I mean, this is like stuff that I'm gonna like expect is gonna come up like soon for me. Like, how do you talk to kids about AI? And I mean, of course, like the kids that I work with are like way more up on this than I am. I mean, I have a couple kids that I work with that have already mentioned ChatGPT and AI kind of stuff, like without me prompting them or anything like that. So it's like, it's one of those things. It's kind of like drugs where I'm like, don't assume that your 14-year-old isn't using drugs. Like you should ask them. Yeah. Like, don't assume that your 14-year-old isn't secretly communicating with ChatGPT. You should ask them. Yeah, because I think that kids are always on the cutting edge of this stuff. And it's also, I'm 33, so I feel like all of a sudden I went from someone that was adopting new technologies as they came out to now, like, when I started working with kids, I was 21 or 22 when I started working with kids. And I didn't feel then at all like I was behind or that I didn't understand what they were saying. And now, as I'm in my 30s, like it's funny, I was talking to one of my adolescent patients and he was talking about other kids that had been like messing with them. And I like made an offhanded comment about how they were like trolling him. And he was like, yes, but no one says that anymore. And it was just like, whoa, okay. Like I'm getting old. And I have to, sometimes my patients will be like, do you know who so-and-so is? And I'm like, nope. And they're like, it's a YouTuber. Like, how could I not know like who this is? Yeah. So, kids are always like out there. And I mean, that's part of why I like working with kids because it keeps me on my toes like this. But I am like, oh my God, like I'm old.
We are the same age. We are not old. I think because you work with teenagers,
that's true. I feel that old. Way. Yeah. That's true. We're not old. Yeah. But I do feel very old. Yeah. It's funny with younger kids, sometimes they'll be like, are you 30? As if that's like, do you remember the dinosaurs?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I worry about them. And, and I think that people were worried about us when stuff like the internet was first coming out. But I think that like for all the worrying that they did, I mean, I remember adults being like, never give out your address, never give out your phone number. And I never did any of those things. But I think that there were like other things that they didn't know were gonna happen that happened. And that's what that's like what I'm like the most afraid of is the stuff that like I can't even anticipate. Right. So it's like I hear stuff about, I like think sometimes about like toxic masculinity, like vulnerable young men, like, and I'm like, oh God, this would be so horrible. And I'm like, but that's what I can imagine. And like, what can't I imagine? And not that there's going to be this like horrible, like doomsday scenario. I don't think it's going to be like that, but I believe it could. And I also like, I'm sure that there are like, it's like the internet was positive too. Like there were really like positive, people like were able to connect, people with rare chronic illnesses were able to connect with other people without illness. Or even like, I even see now it's like, people with, there's so many things about like ADHD and like anxiety and depression out there online that help people feel less alone. And I think that that's like really wonderful. I mean, sometimes my patients will like show me memes that they see about especially about ADHD, but sometimes about anxiety or even about psychotherapy, which is really funny. And I'm like, oh, these, it's like, and it's the same with me when, I'll see something that really resonates with me too. And like, I feel less alone. So a lot of this is good, but like, I just like, I'm so, I want to be so cautious about this. And there's this sense that I have that like the horse has left the barn ages ago. All of a sudden, like this popped up and we were like so not ready for it. Like kind of like we were not ready for like a lot of other things that have happened. And I'm kind of like, I guess this is just how it goes with new technology. Sometimes we're prepared, sometimes we're not. But I just like, I worry so much about the impact on kids. Kind of like I worry about the impact of everything on kids. But I think that I talked for a long time about my broad thoughts. I didn't realize that I had so many thoughts until I like was talking.
I didn't want to interrupt you because you were like on a flow.
Sorry. Well, no, I just like I kept thinking of other things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Fine. Well, and I think also because you work with couples, right? So that's like another thing that it's like nobody is going to be able to replicate.
Yeah, you touched on like a lot of good things in terms of like the macro side of it all the way down to the micro. Right. Yeah. So if we're thinking about like from a therapist perspective, I think that at least ChatGPT, I could see it being helpful in writing treatment plans. Right.
Okay,
like things that is like a supplement to a therapist that will help us in like the crisis situations that you're talking about. Yeah, but like I don't think that it will take over the therapy world and replace a human the way you were sharing. Right. Because some people may want to talk to a computer to prompt them.
That's such a good point. But I think that some people feel safer with that than with a human.
Which I think is valid, right? And the whole point of the therapeutic experience is to be able to break through, whether that's those anxieties, those fear, the trust issues with another human to build that trust again and being vulnerable. There's already prompts out there, right? Like you get text messages like, how'd you feel today? What about this, right? Or like if a therapist gives a journal prompt, right? Like it's a supplement, but it's not, and maybe it will one day, right? The only way I can imagine it taking over like a human therapist is that if there is like a human looking robot in front of you that can read your body language, right? Because our intuition is so strong in our ability to do therapy and like notice if someone is laughing while they're telling a sad story, right? Or we know facts about their mom or dad that is slipping through the cracks a little bit that's reminding us of this, that without that context, I don't think a computer or AI can do that.
No, I think so too. That's so interesting about reading body language because I do think that there are probably AIs that can read body language now.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, right, so much of therapy, this is why I like going to the office, even though there's a lot of nonverbal communication that you can see, obviously, on Zoom.
Sure.
But one of the reasons I like going to the office is like you can see somebody's whole body. Like you can see, are their legs like jittering?
Shaking.
Like there's so much that's unsaid that I use that's all information that I use. And but I do think that there are probably programs right now that can read body language.
Oh yeah. Like I'm sure like for the government and NSA, right, all these things that they need, it's just like, I don't think that they care enough for our general mental health to have that taken over.
Nope. Yeah.
Not until it becomes profitable. No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I also, I think that there are, there's a huge gap in like between like need and like it's a supply and demand thing, but there's like a huge mental health need and there's just like not enough like trained mental health professionals like at all. And it's like, I do wonder, right, where I'm like, who's going to step in that gap and exploit it? I worry a lot about that. There was a really good commercial, the one where it's a guy and another guy and one of them is like, what do you want? And he starts sort of like the camera sort of starts backing up and he's like, I want a job that I don't hate. I want to not feel like I'm constantly like on the edge of, and then the other guy cuts in and he's like, no, what do you want to eat? And it's like,
oh, my bad.
And it's like, and then it's like, do you need to talk to someone? And I'm like, no, but like, that was like, I thought that was really funny. And I thought that was like a really great way to be like, yeah, we all, you know, a lot of us need to talk to somebody. And I feel like it's also like, right, it's that. And then there was that big like hustle culture like thing. I feel like that's kind of like calming down now. And people, it's funny. I keep like hearing people referring to productivity as like a dirty word. And I remember in my early 20s, maybe when I was like 24, I remember like listening to all these podcasts about productivity.
How to be more productive. Yeah.
Yeah. But like that was really like important to me. And now I think the pandemic kind of broke me. I forget if I said this the last time that we talked on the podcast, but I think that I was really like, I need to take care of myself so that I can continue to take care of other people. And that was something that people had always said to me, like my mom and other professionals before that. And I had always just like brushed it off. I had always been like, whatever, like self-care is for wusses. Like I'm going to like push through this and like be a hero. And I'm like, that's so not okay. Like it's not okay for anybody to think that. And I was so glad to see that like, right, women like not a whole generation younger than us, but even like maybe half a generation feeling empowered to be like, no, like my health and safety is more important than this. I just thought that was awesome.
I think this is like a great segue into intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
Because it makes me think about like, so we have the pandemic. We're somewhere in the midst of, towards the end, whatever we are in now. But that first year especially is we were all forced to just slow down. I don't think there has been a global moment like that for everyone to have to sit and reflect about their life choices, what they're going through, if they want to continue it. And like having that hustle culture makes me think about how many generations of trauma had to endure, whether it's oppression or survival mode, so that we are at a point where we feel guilty or ashamed or like a failure if we're not constantly producing and having some kind of value that's like monetary.
I know so many people, both like that I work with in my practice, but also people in my personal life that have expressed that like feeling guilty or feeling like feelings of worthlessness associated with like not producing enough or like not sort of like producing enough income or, you know, I don't know. How do you feel like that like plays with intergenerational trauma? Because you talked a little bit about oppression and like feeling the need to like be productive.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think like through traveling and being in different countries, I do think that American culture is very much the hustle culture.
Yeah.
But like even coming from like, I was a refugee, my parents were refugees, like even my husband's parents came from a different country. Like I think it was still instilled that they didn't even have the opportunity to rest, right? Like there was no space for them to relax or to take time off or to think about joy or what they want to do with their weekend, right? Like that was a silly thought. It's we have to survive, but we have to go. And if you're sitting down, that means either someone's not getting fed, something's not getting done, you might lose your job, your reputation's on the line, which for like communism is huge because what your neighbors think about you can literally put you in jail.
Kill you.
Yeah. So I think that like, and then coming to a country where like, okay, there's not necessarily that happening, but there's still this hustle culture. It's kind of like natural for the next generation to feel like I have to keep doing things. Like if I'm not busy, I am a failure. I'm like useless. I'm worthless. Yeah.
Well,
but that's how strong, right? Like that these is passed down, that these beliefs and like emotions and like our generation has, I don't think we have more anxiety or depression. I think we're allowed to have more of it and it manifests in such a different way. Like I talk to my parents and they're like, there is no such thing as anxiety or depression. Like you're just like, you're not busy enough. You have too much time on your hands to think and feel about shit. And I'm like, okay, fair, because they were in survival mode and they literally didn't have the time to acknowledge it, but they still experienced it.
Yeah.
And so because they weren't allowed to think about it or talk about it, if I have it, I'm ungrateful. I don't think about my privileges, right? And then so it creates this next generation of hyper anxiety, more depression, low self-esteem, shame, right? And there's not a space to talk about these things because you have to kind of just push through and figure it out on your own.
you're right that like, right, it's not like it didn't exist. They just like, nobody talked about it. So like my mom's side of the family is like Irish Catholic. So like nobody talked about any of that stuff. So my mom is really like aware about a lot of that stuff. So she, you know, I remember once she was telling me that her grandmother had, you know, may have had postpartum depression because like after her second child was born, she like went away for a while. I'm using air quotes if you're like not listening, if you're just listening, you know, and I could see her kind of like, I could see the gears turning in her mind as she was talking about it, where she was like, oh, like that's probably what they called it when you were having a mental health problem, that you just, right, like nobody, it's right. It's like either, yeah, it's like you didn't have postpartum depression, you went away for a while. You, like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, there was no like space to talk about feelings. There was just like, yeah, exactly. You just had to survive.
For listeners not knowing exactly what intergenerational trauma is, or like maybe we can kind of go over a little bit like what that means and like how that comes up.
Yeah.
So I think a kind of a broad overview is if prior generations, like our parents, our grandparents, great-grandparents, ancestors, right, have been through some kind of traumatic experience, whether that might be some kind of abuse, racial trauma, like being a refugee, like on a global scale, or during like something happening in your country, or even just like within the family and the culture, is that the way the people survive, they pass on these maladaptive behaviors onto the next generation. And then they live in a new environment and they use these coping skills, which are also not very helpful. And they create more maladaptive mechanisms and continue passing this on until someone in the lineage goes to therapy, breaks the cycle, right? Is aware of these things.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like the one that comes to mind, like the maladaptive coping mechanism that comes to mind because I'm Irish American is alcoholism, which is like sort of the one that like everybody would like, you know, it's like the one that like would come to mind for a lot of people. But it's right. It's like, it's not talking about it, like not acknowledging it. It's like denial, I guess, is like what the coping mechanism would be, or even maybe sublimation. And then like, right. And then like self-medicating with substance. So like not speaking for any individual, but like I think that like the rates are higher in that population or in certain, you know, in certain populations.
And I think the cultural context makes such a huge difference with the intergenerational trauma because, right, like if you are coming from a place where there's war, right, like right now the war in Ukraine, like there's going to be a lot of this.
I know, I think about this all the time.
Passed down to, unfortunately, like the people who are experiencing it now and their children who are really young and then their children that they're going to have, right? Like it's a ripple effect and it's part of it stays in our DNA as well.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
so
it does. It's like epigenetics. It does like literally change.
Literally. Absolutely. Right. And like, like I'm Jewish and, you know, in my ancestry, there was constantly genocides of wiping out Jewish people. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes there's jokes that like, at least like with my family, like, oh, they're always complaining. They're always asking questions. Everyone has IBS, right? But like thinking about how nervous and anxious and stressed you would have to be every day for your life because you think that someone is going to kill you or torture you. Of course, your stomach is going to be turned inside out.
Yeah.
Right? It's like these things kind of make sense and then they're passed on because no one kind of addresses them or they don't know to address them or it just becomes the norm of what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, right, and that's the thing, it's like, after a while, like, the thread of how it got to be that way is lost, and then it just, that's the way it is. And I think that, you know, I think it can be that way with, like, family secrets as intergenerational trauma, where it's like, you feel like something is off, but you can't put your finger on it. But like, there's no like space to ask about it or like talk about it or like anything like that. So you just like kind of want like, are going around like, okay, like, I guess this is normal. You know, I think that that's been the case for like lots of people that I've worked with or like, you know, feeling like something is normal and then like realizing that it's not, like, as you know, as you grow up and sort of like meet other families and like start to like realize that like, oh, like there are things that were tolerated like in my family of origin that were like, that would never have been tolerated like in other families of origin. And you think that everything, you know, you sort of think that, like every family is like this. I mean, I know my family of origin is like pretty conflict averse. So I've spent a lot of time around people whose families of origin were not as conflict averse and who, there was a lot of shouting and a lot of yelling, and that's just like how they interacted with each other.
Yeah.
And I would go over to their houses and the parents would be like screaming at each other and like screaming at the kids. And I would be like, oh my God, this is like a war zone. And like, that was just like Tuesday. And that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. It's that, it's like the chaos of that has an impact too. Like, yeah. Where it's like, I feel like sometimes the chaos of that has an impact in a way that like people, like some people feel like really comfortable with chaos. And like when things are like too stable, they'll like just like do something to like mess it up. Like, just to like, because so they can feel more comfortable.
Yeah. And so I see this a lot. It's actually interesting because it doesn't always have to be like a huge traumatic thing. It could just trickle through the family. So I've had several couples where they were heterosexual couples and the female had severe jealousy and trust issues.
Okay.
And the male partner has not necessarily done anything to warrant that, right? Outwardly. And then so we're doing this family work. As couples therapists, we take time to learn about each person's family, like their family, their parents, and sometimes their grandparents. And, we discover that there was a lot of secrecy around affairs. And, this happens in any culture, any class status, right? But like this particular couple was from an Italian heritage. And within that culture, sometimes there is like an understanding that there will be like a gumar, right? Like a mistress. It doesn't mean that the wives are okay with it, but it's sometimes like ingrained in the culture.
Yeah.
It's baked in. So imagine, you have a grandfather or you have like these uncles who you really admire and you love and they're great family members, but then you see the other side of the female family members talking so negatively about not trusting men. They're pigs, they're dogs, they're good for the family, but they're not good partners, but you love them and you have a partner anyway, right? So like struggling with trust or like this level of vulnerability or intimacy within a romantic relationship too, is that it's trickled down through the generations too.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point that like if in the environment where you grew up, just like nobody trusted men and it was just this like not even an open secret. It was just like out in the open that like men are untrustworthy. They're like they're gonna betray you. Like no matter what you do, like you can't escape it. Like, I mean, like who would trust their husband after that?
Yeah. Right. And so like that's traumatic too. That's like a relational trauma that is passed down until, it takes a lot of work for that particular couple to work through building trust
I can imagine.
Based on this relationship.
Because I think also that then that like runs up against this like, I feel like this ideal here that like if your husband cheats on you, it's your fault. Like that's because like you were found wanting, like you didn't like satisfy his needs, like you weren't like a patient enough or loving enough or sexy enough or whatever. It's not. So that's the thing. It's also because it's being like taken from this culture where it's like, like I don't know that much about it, so I don't want to like make any generalizations, but it's like if you're moving from a culture where like this is a thing that happened a lot, that like everybody just understood that this was what men did and that it had nothing to do with women, like, and then it's like you're moving it to this culture where it's like if this happens it is your fault. Like I feel like that like is really destabilizing and like confusing.
Absolutely.
And of course, it's like nobody's fault.
Changes.
Yeah. And,
we were talking about this a little bit last night of thinking about whether you come from an individualistic versus a collective culture.
Yeah.
Right. And like how that also shows up in mental health and therapy, which I think is so important for therapists generally to be a lot more culturally competent and like sensitive to cultural differences.
Definitely.
Because I find I also don't want to generalize, right? But like in the Eastern European culture, at least from my personal experience.
I feel like that's not a generalization. Like you're like if you were from Eastern Europe. So
I know.
I feel like it's okay.
But like not everybody, right? Like
no, I understand.
Not everyone's going to have the same experience I have.
Yeah.
But like within my own personal, but also professional experiences, because I do work with a lot of clients who, whether they are born in Eastern Europe or they came here as children, is that a lot of the family dynamics are very enmeshed, which is, for people who don't know, it's basically like kind of like a group think, like everyone's in everyone's business. Everyone kind of believes the same thing, the ideals, the narratives, like it's in line. So having someone do something or think differently or want to be an individual is seen as a threat to the family unit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and I mean, we were talking a little bit about this because my parents were both born in the United States, so they were, and they grew up in like the 70s, it was very like, both sort of grew up in this very like individualistic like culture. So like I didn't have any tension with that. They were like, you can be whatever you want to be, and like you should follow your dreams, and you can go live wherever you want, and like be whatever you want, and we would never try to stop you. And like and when I was a kid, I would be like, well, even like when I would ask them, sometimes I'd be like, oh, do we have enough money for this? Or like, oh, like, what are you going to do if this happens? They'd be like, don't worry about it. Like we're the parents, you're the child. Like, you don't have to worry about that stuff.
Oh, that sounds so healthy.
I know. Well, yeah, it was, I give my parents a lot of props. But I think that's a privileged position to be in where I genuinely didn't have to worry about it. Right. So like, I mean, it's very easy to be like, oh, that's really healthy. But it's like, that was the truth. Like I didn't have to worry about whatever it was. I mean, like as long as they were all like normal requests, like, or I didn't have to worry about it. And I think that I bump up against my husband's from Ukraine, and he came here when he was a kid with his parents, and it is like that, just like the way that we interact with like both of our sets of parents is like really different. I feel like I remember the first time after like he spent time with my parents and me at my parents' house, he was like, wow, like he was like, your parent, like you and your parents are so like close. Like, I feel like he almost felt like we were like friends, like, because that just like isn't, it's like the relationship that he has with his parents is really different. It's like, there's so much love there, but it's like not like, it's not like this thing where it's like, his parents have like very specific ideas about like what they want him to do and be, and like aren't afraid to express that. And like my parents would never like try to tell me like how they thought that I should be. So it's so funny because that was like such a and it blows my mind like how different like that has been. And it's like, right, it's not bad, it's just like two different like ways of like two different sort of like sets of expectations that come like it with like sort of like the cultural context that like they have and that we have.
Absolutely. And like not having that cultural context, right? It's so easy to pathologize foreigners or immigrants in their family dynamics, because if we're looking at it from an individualistic standpoint, these things are wildly unhealthy. And there's like emotional manipulation and guilt trips and enmeshment and like lack of boundaries, or like all these things that would be considered unhealthy and not a safe environment for somebody on paper, and for someone who doesn't come from that lens. But then when you look at it from the generational trauma and the things that they've been through, it's actually like they needed to be this close to survive.
Oh, and that's such a good point.
And they literally lived in the close quarters. Like, I was born in Azerbaijan, and my parents told me like there were no new developments. They didn't build new houses or residents, right? Like you lived in this apartment until someone died, and then you had a lottery to like get into that new apartment. But everybody lived in like a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment. I'm talking about like grandparents, parents, and their children. So you're physically in a close quarters, and then emotionally, everything about each other because...
Right, of course, because like there's no escaping it. It's like if you're, it's like, it's not like you're going to like go up to your room and like write in your diary and cry. Like, like I did when I was a teenager. Like, I mean, like, right, if you're having like a rough day, like everybody knows.
And everyone's got thoughts on it. And because... And there's also like this really strong sense of what happens in the family stays in the family. Like you can't tell strangers, you can't tell your neighbors, you can't even tell your friends, because there was such a fear and a lack of trust towards other people, because it literally could harm you. It could
kill you.
It could kill you.
No, it's funny that you're saying that now, because like even like after I was telling that story about how my great grandmother might have had postpartum depression, like maybe like I was like, I shouldn't have said that on the podcast. Like, because that's that's
ingrained.
It's like, don't talk about that's private. Like that's not. And I'm like, but this is also like how is anybody going to ever talk about postpartum depression if like people aren't willing to be like, I had postpartum depression or my mom had postpartum depression? Like, yeah. But I think that, right, I could sort of like almost like feel like the shame of like, being like, I can't believe you like talked about that. Like, and anybody could listen to it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I know.
I feel like I'm like, getting like, I feel like I'm like sweating, like thinking. Yeah. If you're listening, don't tell my mom.
That's so funny. But like, right, we're in a position now where that, for the most part, is not something that we have to worry about.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we can openly share our opinions and thoughts online in this kind of way, and nothing really detrimental will happen to us.
I don't know. So like, I have like a fear. I think it's probably like a healthy fear, but like I have a fear of, part of the reason that I don't do a lot of stuff online is like I have a fear of like making a mistake and then it being there forever. So
sure.
But you're right. It's like, it's not, the consequences are not going to be like your entire village shuns you, right? The consequences are just probably I'm going to get like some kind of mean comment.
Yeah. Like mean
go
comment.
About the rest of my day. Yeah.
Right. We'll feel embarrassed. We might feel ashamed.
I'll feel shame. Yeah.
But everyone in our neighborhood probably is not going to know or come knocking on our door or call the police for some reason.
Right. Exactly.
Unless we're doing something crazy. Right.
Yeah. But and even then.
Yeah.
I feel like there's like much more of like a live and let live like situation. Again, because like it's not like this life or death like thing where it's like if you didn't like, you know, right. It's not this like life or death situation where like you have to like rely on your family and you have to like keep everything a secret because it's like if somebody finds out that like you're like, I don't know, like not the religion that they thought or like, right. It's like then, you know, you could really, yeah. I mean, like for years and years, you know, it's like if somebody found out that you were Catholic, like, in, you know, I mean, in a variety of places, you know, there would be like consequences from that.
I think it's like we can make the choice for ourselves, but it's for other cultures. You making the choice for you reflects poorly on the whole family, and that impacts the whole family.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard for a lot of generations who went through the real, very real, valid threats of that, passing that down onto their children now where that's not as severe, having a real struggle with like figuring out that vulnerability and being able to balance like those boundaries or like not giving unsolicited advice or like allowing you to trust other people.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like, allowing you to trust other people is a big one.
Emily, thank you so much for coming back on. If anybody wants to hear more about the ins and outs of what Emily does on a professional basis, you can check out an earlier episode from season 1. But Emily, can you share where people can reach out to you or find you if they want to work with you?
So right now I work at Integrative Psychiatry of Manhattan. So you can reach me at ESHAW at psych-nyc.com. That's my email address.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes for everybody to find you too.
Awesome.
Emily, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Of course. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Of course.